This is an iMac from 2011, and yes, I bought it for $30. And let me tell you, it's an absolute beast. Not in performance, I mean in weight. 14 years ago, this thing was the go-to choice for anyone who wanted a clean desk setup and loved the Apple ecosystem. But fast forward to 2025, and Apple has gone through 3, maybe 4 design overhauls, new architectures, and a whole new era of ultra-thin iMacs. So the big question is, has this 2011 iMac officially fallen behind, or does it still have some life left in it? Let's find out in today's video. From the outside, there's nothing too crazy going on. In fact, this iMac actually looks pretty good for its age. No major scratches, no dents, nothing that screams survived 3 divorces and a basement flood. It really looks like it lived a comfortable life, probably in a house with air conditioning and owners who treated it better than their houseplants. So let's plug it in and see what kind of hardware we're working with. And of course, there's no hard drive. Perfect. Not a deal breaker though, which means it's time to do the fun part. Pop off the front glass, lift the panel, and install a new drive so this old iMac can finally wake up again. Honestly, I was a little too lazy to reinstall macOS. Let's be real, you've probably seen OS X running on an old iMac 1,000 times already, right? So this time, I decided to just plug in my SSD with Windows pre-installed and use that instead. It saves me the hassle of creating a macOS installer, and it lets me see how a 2011 iMac handles Windows in 2025. Who knows? Maybe the performance will be completely different compared to macOS. I also wanted to test the drivers, gaming performance, and see whether this old iMac can actually function as a normal Windows PC. Less work for me, more interesting experiments for us. Let's see how far this machine can go. Luckily, the whole process of switching this iMac from Mac OS to Windows went smooth as butter. No errors, no freezes, just plug in the SSD and Windows booted right up. Inside, the machine is running an Intel i5 2500S, but here's where things got weird. CPU-Z showed it as 2 cores, 2 threads, which made 0 sense because according to Intel's own website, this chip is supposed to be 4 cores, 4 threads. That meant Windows was somehow limiting the CPU and not using all the cores, so I had to fix that. I opened the run window with Win+R, typed msconfig, went to the boot tab, advanced options, and found that the number of processors box was checked and locked to 2. I unchecked it, hit OK, apply, restart, and finally Windows detected all 4 cores and 4 threads properly. The Intel Core i5 2500S scored about 273 points in single core and 904 points in multi-core, which honestly isn't bad at all. For a Sandy Bridge CPU from 2011, it still holds up surprisingly well in 2025, at least for basic everyday tasks. The system also comes with 4 GB of RAM running in dual channel, meaning 2 2GB sticks, a nice bonus for an older machine. And the most interesting part? It actually has a dedicated AMD GPU, the Radeon HD 6700M, which supports DirectX 11. That means I can at least attempt to play some newer games without instantly crashing the system. One of the biggest strengths of Apple devices, especially iMacs, has always been display quality. And even though this machine is from 2011, it came with a full HD panel, which back then was considered insanely sharp. In today's standards, it's kind of like the 4K of its time. To really see how good it is, I put it side by side with my Dell U2422H, a monitor released in 2021, a full decade newer. And honestly, the iMac's display impressed me more than I expected. The colors are rich, accurate, and surprisingly sharp. I even removed the glass panel from the iMac just to get a direct comparison, and the difference became even harder to notice. Not exaggerating, if I had to pick between the two purely for color and clarity, I'd actually choose the iMac's panel. That's exactly why iMac displays have always been trusted for creative work. Anything that needs accurate, lifelike colors. Whether it's Photoshop, video editing, color grading, or any kind of visual design, this kind of panel delivers the clarity and consistency that creators rely on. But it's not perfect. This iMac gets loud and hot. If you plan on using it in a quiet bedroom, prepare to hear the fans kicking up like a tiny jet engine. Back when it was new, this iMac would have cost you around $1,000. Definitely not a small amount for most people. But price aside, the big question is this: how well can a 2011 iMac handle modern games in 2025? Starting with Minecraft, running at full HD with 8 chunks, the performance honestly surprised me. The FPS went all the way up to 100+, and the gameplay felt smooth and stable the entire time. The bottleneck here isn't the CPU, it's the 4 gigabytes of RAM. The system was using almost all of it, hitting around 3.9 gigabytes, and the GPU load climbed to about 85%. Even so, the overall experience was pretty solid. No major stutters, no heavy frame drops. Just a surprisingly playable session on a 2011 iMac. Moving on to Doom, running at HD settings. And this is where the iMac starts to show its age. The GPU is getting pushed to 99%, completely maxed out because of how demanding the game's graphics are. FPS hovers around 15 to 20, which definitely doesn't feel smooth. The CPU temperature also climbed past 70 degrees Celsius, and that caused the clock speed to throttle down to about 2.8 gigahertz. So both the CPU and GPU are struggling here. If you really want to play Doom on this machine, you'll definitely need to drop the resolution and lower the graphics even further. Next up is CS2. At full HD resolution with low settings, the game only manages around 20 to 25 FPS. And for a fast-paced shooter like CS2, that's nowhere near ideal. The gameplay feels sluggish, aiming doesn't feel responsive, and overall it's just not a comfortable experience. This iMac simply doesn't have the horsepower to keep up with modern competitive titles. After testing those 3 games, it's pretty clear this configuration is struggling hard with modern titles. Anything remotely graphics heavy turns into a leggy, choppy mess. But don't worry, we're not stopping here. Right now, I'm going to tear this entire machine apart and upgrade whatever I can. And trust me, taking an iMac apart is not easy. The cables inside are tiny, fragile, and way too easy to snap, so I had to be extremely careful. Apple really chose chaos when they designed this thing. The CPU is mounted on the underside of the board, which means I had to remove the entire motherboard just to reach it. For the upgrade, I'm swapping the original CPU with an Intel i7-2700K, a chip that's appeared in a couple of my videos already, so I won't go over its whole history again. This iMac is actually pretty modern in one aspect. It comes with 4 RAM slots. Right now, it only has 2 2GB sticks installed, so I'm adding 2 more 4GB sticks, bringing the total up to 12 gigabytes of RAM. That's a huge improvement for a system this old. Unfortunately, the GPU is soldered and can't be upgraded, so we're stuck with the Radeon HD 6700M for now. But at least the CPU and RAM upgrades should give us a noticeable boost. Jumping into CPU Z, everything is detected correctly. The i7.270K shows up, and the full 12 gigabytes of RAM is recognized. Alright, time to jump back into the games and see how much of a difference these upgrades actually make. Jumping back into Minecraft, the FPS is noticeably higher after the upgrade, about 20 to 30 frames more than before, and sometimes even spiking up to 150 FPS. When I pushed the render distance to 32 chunks, the system started to struggle a bit, holding around 25 FPS with occasional jumps to 60 FPS. And once I switched the graphics to Fabulous, the FPS dipped to around 15, making the experience pretty choppy. So yeah, this setup is clearly happiest at around 8 chunks, where everything runs smooth and playable without stressing the hardware too much. With CS2, things honestly didn't change much. The FPS still hovered around 20 frames, which makes sense because the main bottleneck here is the GPU, so the upgrade didn't really boost performance in this game. Even when I dropped the resolution down to HD, the gain was only about 5 to 10 FPS, and that's still far from enough to enjoy a fast-paced shooter like CS2. In short, the CPU upgrade helped in lighter games, but for titles like this, the GPU is the real limiting factor. So after all the testing, here's the truth. Buying a 2011 iMac in 2025 is both surprisingly fun and painfully limited. For light tasks like browsing, watching videos, or basic photo work, it still holds up. And that display is honestly timeless. But once you step into modern gaming, the cracks start to show. The GPU is too old, temperatures run high, and performance is only playable at best, never truly smooth. Still, for the price and the nostalgia factor, it's a fun machine to own. Thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments what old device you want me to test next.